Welcome back to the Happy Saver podcast. I'm Ruth, a personal finance blogger right here in Aotearoa, and I am back to my normal podcast episodes now, where I chat with a diverse bunch of people and I learn their story and I condense it down so that you can hear helpful, relatable stories from Kiwis who are sharing their experiences, their tips and their point of view on personal finance here in New Zealand. Now, remember I said a few months ago that I was getting a full set of braces? Well, this is my very first episode that I'm recording with them on. So bear with me and I hope I don't sound too different. Now, Ruby stumbled across the Happy Saver in October of 2022, prompting her to email me with a couple of questions. She'd recently signed up with Sharesies and was testing the waters by investing $20 a week, and she had a few questions about where to start, given the overwhelming amount of options available. Plus, she had a question about her KiwiSaver. She was home with 2 young tamariki and had just realised that even when she was not in the paid workforce, she could voluntarily contribute money into her account, which she immediately started doing. Now, taking a moment to think about investing made her start digging around for more information about her money, hence her email to me. From then on, her thirst for financial literacy, it just grew as she listened to the Happy Saver, she read my blogs, and then began to search for information that could teach her to be better with her pūtea. Now, a year went by and I heard from her again. And this is not unusual at all. I'll often hear from people who have an intense back and forth over email and then nothing. And more often than not, they will pick up the email right where we left off. And I've gotten quite used to this happening now. Her next email went into more detail and led to me asking her to be on my podcast today, but I've changed their names to protect their privacy. We picked up the phone for our kōrero in mid-March of 2024. She was born in 1990 and she's now 34, easy maths for me, and her husband Tim is 38, and they live in rural Canterbury on a 10-acre block that they bought in 2017. Their 2 preschool children are now aged 3 and 4. But before I really get into it, you know the drill. Let me tell you about today's fabulous sponsor. Have you ever wanted to save for a big goal, like a holiday or an expensive purchase? Having the discipline to save for a goal reduces stress and allows for the fulfillment of meaningful experiences and desires without resorting to debt. Pocketsmith is ideal to help you save up for big ticket items such as a holiday. You begin by creating the habit of regularly setting aside money, and Pocketsmith helps you track your progress towards your goal using customizable budgeting tools, cash flow forecasts, and saving trackers, enabling you to set and manage specific financial targets efficiently. I always have a number of different goals on the go, and Pocketsmith helps me keep track of them all. If you want to supercharge your finances with Pocketsmith, have we got a deal for you? Happy Saver listeners get a whopping 50% off your first 2 months of Pocketsmith's foundation plan. To get your deal, go to pocketsmith.com/The Happy Saver. That's pocketsmith.com/The Happy Saver. Both Ruby and Tim are from Canterbury, and she started life on a farm with her parents before they sold up and moved to the city. Her dad was a plumber and her mother worked as a teacher, going back to work when Ruby, the youngest of 4, was 7. Her parents were good at DIY, and there was a procession of houses that they moved into, renovated, and then rented when they moved on to the next one, steadily building up a rental property portfolio as they went. They moved on when they saw their next housing opportunity, one that they thought was a good deal, and at one point she said they had 5 rental properties plus the family home that they lived in. Ruby said that despite this rental portfolio, there was not much money floating about, meaning life was not extravagant by any means, but her parents' ability to get stuck in and do much of the mahi themselves eventually paid off. And I suspect as they began to pay down or pay off mortgage debt, their income from rental property and their jobs would have started to grow. She said that it's really only been in the last 10 years that the pieces of their puzzle began to come together, with both parents having good, well-paid government jobs and a property portfolio gathering steam. So did they talk to Ruby and her siblings about money? No, money is not something they discussed that much, either then or now, so she was not sure of the details. And it was typical to what I often hear from people I interview, and the main motto that they learned from their parents was that you had to work for what you wanted in life. Many lessons about how to make money, but few about what to do with it. And Ruby recalls she was also warned that you don't want to get into consumer debt, but I guess they lead by example that mortgage debt was okay. During high school, Ruby's parents encouraged her to pick up part-time jobs with a paper run and babysitting, and she would use that money to pay for petrol in the car and pay for any extra that was needed outside of schooling and sports, like buying clothing or going out with her friends. Her parents have always expressed a desire to help their kids and financially supported each of their sporting interests, of which there were many, she said, and then more recently they've helped each of them with the purchase of a home, but I'll get to more on that shortly. Ruby was extremely sporty growing up, and at the end of year 13, she got a full fee 3-year sports scholarship to go to Lincoln University. To get one of these, you have to be a top athlete, which she was in hockey, and it was her fear of going into student debt that made her apply for scholarships. She said she has always had a level head when it came to her money. She turned down a scholarship she was offered at another university in a different city because she would have had to spend money on rent and living costs, but staying in Canterbury, she could live rent-free at home. She also picked up a bakery job with 4 to 5 a.m. starts that paid her about $100 a week. She knew that even the small income would reduce the amount of money she would need to borrow on her student loan. Plus, this was one of the few jobs that she could fit in around her studies and extensive sporting commitments. The scholarship came with some strings attached. She was obligated to keep up her sport, which was hockey, which included 4 training sessions a week, regular gym sessions, fitness tests, and of course, actually participating in competition sport at various levels. And honestly, when she told me her academic workload, plus her sporting commitments, and the fact that she also held down a job, well, I didn't know how she found the time. But she did, completing a degree that would now be called a Bachelor of Agribusiness and Food Marketing. It's a mix of food science and marketing, she said. After a full 3 years, she was not quite done. She noted that many graduates were struggling to get work, so Lincoln University extended her scholarship for 1 more year to allow her to do the honours program, and she finished with A-class honours. She started university at the age of 19 and was finished by the age of 23, and Ruby certainly made the most of those 4 years, sucking every opportunity from the experience. And what I really liked was that as she studied, she was surveying the job market, and when she saw her 3-year degree was not quite enough, well, she did 1 more year, knowing that it would make her more attractive to employers. And I asked her how she settled on this particular degree course. Well, she loved food, and due to her sport, she was interested in nutrition too. She liked people and thought she would enjoy marketing. Her scholarships were available no matter the course, but her course selection was a pretty haphazard one, chosen in large part because her friend, who she just happened to be sitting beside while she was signing up for uni, was also doing it. When she read the description, she felt it ticked all her boxes, and as it turned out, it actually was the best choice that she could have made. For some, planning their tertiary education journey takes years in the making. For many others, Ruby and myself included, it has a bit more of a throw a dart at a dartboard strategy and see where it lands. It's worked out for her though. Although she was doing her best to avoid student debt by picking up extra work when she could, living for almost rent-free, and receiving a scholarship, she did come out with about a $6,000 student loan, and this mostly came about early in her studies as she began to wrap her head around the costs associated, and she got better at being financially organised as she went on. She did really well to have such a small loan as she was playing a huge amount of sport at a high level, which took up a lot of her time, plus studying full-time, leaving her less time to do paid work. She used student loans in the best way possible as an absolute last resort to pay for the things that she simply couldn't find the money to pay for herself. And when she entered the workforce, her 12% salary deductions reduced the loan really quickly. And in her second year at university, when she was just 20, she met her future partner, Tim, who was 25 and already a qualified plumber. And she remembers at the time telling him just how stressed she was about taking on student debt, but he just laughed because he'd earned his qualification on the job while being paid and was already a qualified plumber. He was flatting with a whole lot of guys while Ruby kept living at home because her parents were happy to have her there, as long as she pulled her own weight, which she did. Tim, on the other hand, was going out all the time and spending all that he earned. And because it was early days in their relationship and they were not that serious, being together was a whole lot of fun. But from a financial standpoint, they were both polar opposites. She was the saver because she just had to be. She had no money. And he was a spender because he had the income and he could be. Now, these distinct categories and behaviours are by no means fixed for life, though. And speaking more broadly, they are often just scripts that we tell ourselves. So that's something to think about. While at university, Ruby did some job placements with some large companies as part of her studies, which created work opportunities for herself when she finished. So straight out of university, she got a 6-month internship at a large milk production company. And once that ended, she spent a year working for a large grocery distributor on their marketing team, where she was paid about $45,000 a year. She said it was mostly a cool job. There was lots of administrative work and dealing with suppliers, but morally and from a nutritional standpoint, promoting products to consumers that she wouldn't eat herself, well, it just didn't sit well with her. Plus, the money was not very good. So she took her morals, her education, and sports coaching skills elsewhere, and she joined a government organisation that delivered nutrition programs into schools. She got a bump in salary up to $60,000 plus a car to take her all over Te Waipunamu, the South Island, to talk in schools. Also, and it took her 3.5 years to complete, her employer also paid her to do a postgraduate nutrition qualification. And much like Tim, she was also paid to learn on the job. After putting in many years of hard mahi, in her late 20s, around 2017, she reached a point where she wanted to earn a higher salary. So she took up an account management role, again earning $60,000 a year at a company that manufactured and sold dairy products. So yes, the salary was the same, but she knew that she had the potential to learn a lot of different skills that would be valuable to an employer and lead to that higher income. She got a car that she could use for both business and personal use, which is a great saving. Plus, she was also able to join the Southern Cross Health Insurance Program. After 2 years, her patience paid off and she was promoted to sales manager and her salary increased to $100,000. Her biggest financial triumph is actually getting promoted within this company. She feels she worked really hard in the first 2 years with a lot of long hours, and to be recognised felt really good. She noted that there were not a lot of women in high positions in the field she was in, and she was proud that they saw her work and promoted her. Now, because I was only speaking with Ruby and we had limited time, most of the questions I asked were about her, but she did say of Tim's upbringing that his family was super conservative and restrained on their spending. And when he was absorbed into her whānau, whose income and spending at that time were increasing, he saw what he could potentially have in time. For Ruby, with a plumber for a dad and a plumber for a boyfriend, it was relatively natural that the two men would get along, and because of her dad's mentoring, Tim's ambition has grown to want bigger and better for himself, his business, and his whānau, and just generally get more out of life as the years roll on. And today he owns his own small plumbing business and is doing exceptionally well, she said, proving himself to be both a good tradesperson and a good business owner. As both of their careers grew, I asked what came next and how their putia or their money played a role. In 2014, they bought a house in a slightly confusing, to me at least, roundabout way. In her last year of study, they were spending so much time together anyway that they thought that they would test living together. So Tim moved in with her at her parents' house so that he and Ruby could save some money. A spender was transitioning into a saver. Her parents saw a rental property for sale that had an EQC claim against it. Remember that the Christchurch earthquakes had been happening over the last couple of years at this point. Her parents purchased the earthquake-damaged property for $329,000, and they suggested that they could all renovate it together using the EQC payout to pay for repairs, and each of their labour was sweat equity or free. Then, once the work was all complete, they could get the house revalued. Now, the value, of course, would go up. So, despite the increase in value, Ruby's parents said that they would sell it to them for the original price of $329,000. It was a nice helping hand onto the property ladder for these first home buyers. But how on earth did a broke student manage to purchase property was the question that I had to ask. In theory, they would have needed around $65,000 as a deposit. As soon as the idea was floated, they had immediately started saving and managed to scrape together about $10,000 collectively. They then both applied for and received the first home grant from the government, which was $5,000 each. Now this, sadly, is the grant that has just been scrapped by the government. Tim was adamant that they shouldn't cash out their KiwiSavers, and she agreed because she said that there was not much in them anyway, probably only about $10,000 each. So they left them intact, realising that the more you leave in there and the longer you can leave it alone, the more chance that it has to grow. And this foresight is proving to be correct. So they had about $20,000 cash. They got a mortgage from their bank and purchased the house from their parents for $329,000. However, due to the work that they all collectively did, the new valuation came in at $410,000, meaning that the bank felt that they now had enough equity, $81,000 worth, give or take, that they didn't actually have to put any cash down at all. Now, it does surprise me that the bank was still satisfied enough to lend them money, given they were young with little track record of managing money, but I suspect that with their full-time jobs it was enough for them. I'm pleased it worked out for them, and sometimes you just have to grab these rare financial opportunities when they come along. The house was a big house on a small rear cross-leased section, and many new builds were happening around it as the Canterbury earthquake's post-build frenzy really started to take off. Entering into such a big financial commitment together was a bit of a wake-up call for Tim in particular, she said. They combined finances because they saw their relationship as a partnership, and when they decided to buy a house, they thought that if they were going to commit to this, they were going to do it together as a team. Combining their money felt like a good idea and a natural step in the right direction, as they had the same goals and they could work towards them together. But Tim did get a bit of a shock when the reality of having a mortgage kicked in. It instantly felt like almost every penny they both earned now went to the bank. He ring-fenced $150 a week that he could just blow, which he said was a huge shock and the hardest point of his life. Prior to thinking about buying a house, he just spent everything he earned. But that freedom came to a grinding halt with all the expenses that home ownership brings with it, the biggest one being a mortgage payment, of course. They stayed in this home for 3 years before selling it for $480,000, which was $151,000 more than they paid for it, and moving in about 2017 to a lifestyle property for which they paid $725,000. So it was a huge jump up for this young couple. They increased their mortgage even higher to $580,000, which was considered, and still is if you ask me, a big mortgage. But during this time, her income jumped from $60,000 to $100,000, making it more manageable, and given the size of their mortgage, well, it really needed to. She was late 20s by now and Tim was early 30s, and they couldn't believe that they had managed to buy a 10-acre lifestyle property so young. They wanted their future kids to grow up on land and be with nature, seeing where their vegetables are grown, and having cows for meat and chickens for eggs, and they had made it happen. They settled into their mortgage, and when I asked if they had a long-term financial plan to manage that debt, sadly, but not uncommonly, she said that they didn't have any plans at all. They had worked directly with their bank to structure their mortgage, and they essentially broke it into two parts, with $480,000 in one bucket of debt and the remaining $100,000 in another. In hindsight, she said that they wished they had some help from a mortgage broker negotiating rates and setting up a structure, and more importantly, a plan to systematically pay down the debt. In her head was the simple thought that they should pay as much as they could every month, and the balance would come down, which technically it will, if interest rates stay steady and repayments continue. Their careers progressed and their incomes increased, and perhaps had they had a repayment plan that clearly showed them what upping payments would do to lower their debt, they might have increased their payments. Instead, they just continued making the same payments and used their additional income that came from pay rises on more overseas holidays. And although she doesn't regret that travel, the concerts and the fun that they had, in hindsight she said their spending blew out a lot, and she knows that they shouldn't have been so lavish because they actually could have afforded to both pay down debt more aggressively and travel. They could have been much further ahead today, she said. So hindsight is, once again, a wonderful thing, particularly as you compare interest rates of 5 years ago with today. This was something that actually I could really relate to, though. Johnny and I did exactly the same. As we earned more, we spent more, instead of using that money to grow our wealth for the long term. And from time to time, I do acknowledge to myself that we would be fully retired by now had we not blown so much money and instead invested that money in ETFs. We were actually reflecting on this quite recently and decided that although we had some life-changing travel experiences for sure, that is not where all the money went. We also just blew a ton of putia on consumer crap back at home. It's only a mistake if you repeat the same behaviour twice, though, I think, and we have well and truly learned from that experience. Within a 2-year period, these guys had 2 children, and it's at that time I find that you do get some clarity around how the decisions that you made years ago impact your life today, particularly when household income is affected. Although they got by, heading into maternity leave with a smaller mortgage would have been extremely helpful, she said. She went back to work full-time in 2023 and has since juggled with making childcare work. They employed a mixture of ways to do this. Both of their children went to kindergarten full-time. It runs school hours, 8:45 to 2:45, she said, and they were entitled to 20 hours of free care per week per child. And to cover the extra hours when they were still at work but their tamariki needed care, they paid out of pocket an extra $50 per week. They also employed a nanny for a time, a local woman who had older children of her own and was looking for part-time work. It cost Ruby and Tim $650 a week, and she filled in the gaps before and after daycare to enable both Ruby and Tim to work. Their nanny recently left, and their 2 tamariki have moved into preschool, so their childcare costs have come down to $360 a week, saving them about $300 a week. Given their childcare outgoings, which at one point must have been taking up a really decent chunk of at least one of their weekly paychecks, I had to ask about their take-home pay. Tim keeps his plumbing business small, with just 3 of them on the team, with perhaps a 4th on the horizon. He runs a good operation and takes great pride in his work, and his customers see this and they tell their friends, so he is really short of work. Tim draws a salary of about $1,650 after tax each week, or about $6,600 a month. When Ruby decided to go back to work, she spent a good 6 months looking for part-time work, and she just couldn't find that opportunity in her field though, so Ruby returned to full-time work in late 2023, working for a company that supplies ingredients to food manufacturers. Now working as an account manager, which is a sales role, she is earning $110,000 a year gross, paid monthly, plus full use of a company car, so she roughly takes home about $5,400 a month after tax. So their combined take-home pay is about $12,000 a month after tax, give or take. Both have continued to contribute to the Milford Active Growth KiwiSaver accounts. She contributes 4% of her income, and her employer contributes 3%. Her balance is now about $60,000. And given that he is self-employed, he makes voluntary contributions to the same fund, and his balance is also about $60,000. So this is a great nest egg for these two to continue to build upon over the next 25 to 30 years. They are doing the right thing by both contributing to their retirement funds as well as paying off debt. Had they decided to just focus on becoming debt-free, they would run the risk of becoming asset-rich with all of their money in their house and cash-poor with no money in savings or retirement. And you really do need to be able to service both debt and retirement accounts to get a financial balance in life. 4 years ago, their mortgage structure had a big change. Now, remember I said earlier that her parents helped each child into their first home. Well, selling them their first home cheaply was helpful, but that's not what I meant. Today, Ruby and Tim have 2 mortgages, and brace yourself because it took me quite a while to get my head around their setup. There is a reason I avoid debt. It is often confusing and it always comes with strings attached. So these two now have a $227,000 mortgage with their bank, and they make a $650 a week payment on that. And they have another $200,000 debt to her parents. Remember that her parents owned several properties. Well, they had downsized and, I assume, had cash, which they then lent to each of their 4 children. each received $200,000 to go towards the purchase of a home. Their parents wanted to support their kids and give them the use of their money while they were young. But it is, and at the same time it is not, an inheritance. Tim and Ruby have a contract in place to pay her parents back at $250 a week starting in 2026. Now, I'm recording this episode in mid-2024, meaning that they currently make no repayments on this portion of their debt, but those repayments will start in 2026. From that date, Ruby and Tim will have to make allowances in their budget to pay this weekly debt. And what if their marriage ends? Well, the $200,000 must be paid back to her parents. And how might they do this? By selling the property or taking on bank debt to pay them back. If her parents die during that payoff period, well, the debt is wiped. But the situation her parents are more likely gearing up for is for cash flow in their retirement. With 4 children, each paying $250 a week, that is $1,000 a week, or $52,000 a year of income on top of a pension payment of about $40,000 a year. Now, I was tempted to track them down and invite them on this podcast for clarification of their plans here, but I didn't. Ruby is grateful that her parents have given them this opportunity because this loan is saving them a fortune in bank interest. But given her newly acquired financial wisdom, where they are both now focused on becoming entirely debt-free, this debt is going to muck with her head, she said. They have a rough plan to have their bank mortgage paid off within the next 5 years, or maybe sooner, which will leave them with the parent loan with its stipulation that they make weekly payments for 800 weeks or 15 years and 3 months. Ruby will be 50 and Tim will be 55 when the payment ends. Until that time, they will have to budget for that $250 weekly payment. When they reach the point that this is their only debt, they know they will want it gone, yet they will have this weekly $250 payment to make. And this, my friends, is where math meets life. Now, the mathematicians listening to this will be calculating interest saved, the fact the payment remains static at $250 a week despite inflation, etc., etc. And I can hear your brains just ticking over as you listen to this. But the reality is that their increasing desire to become debt-free and to call time on using their current income to pay for things they bought in the past, just because it gives them peace of mind to do so, it will come up against the logic of math. Now, I don't personally like these complicated debt arrangements that families create because, as I said, mathematics generally always comes up against real life. They look good on paper, but as the years progress, situations always crop up that no one anticipated. But I feel a great deal of appreciation for people like Ruby and Tim who share these types of financial scenarios with me because I use them to think about how I may or may not financially help my own daughter in the future. My thought is that I will either gift money to my child or I won't. If I think Johnny and I need money for our future, then we will hold on to it. But if we know we have plenty of money, then I'll gift money to her with no expectation of it being paid back, and I will trust her to make the right decisions with it. I'll get my own whare in order before I help her with hers. There are far fewer strings attached that way, so I think you'll agree that theirs is an interesting arrangement and only time will tell how it all pans out. So, how did Ruby end up on this podcast? Everything I've said sounds relatively common and typical of how many New Zealanders wander into debt via housing, then buy one, then upsize their mortgage and or buy multiple indebted properties to rent out, and then they stay indebted for the next 30 to 40 years. There are many New Zealand podcasts where this is actually the strategy that they actively teach, but that's not really my thing at all. So what changed for this young couple, I wondered, where they began to question their status quo and what led her to seeking information about money. I asked if there was a point when a switch was flicked and they came to the conclusion that they begin to think a little differently. Well, Ruby was on maternity leave and deep into all that goes with caring for a baby. And when she found pockets of downtime, she found that the people I'd interviewed for the Happy Saver podcast stimulated her brain, and she gently got more invested and interested in learning about how she and Tim handle their money. And down the rabbit hole she went. It was while she was searching around for financial knowledge that she did entertain the idea of becoming a financial advisor, even going so far as to begin her training. But she pretty quickly realised that the end role in that particular company she was doing her training through would just end up with her selling insurance. And after doing a couple of papers, she realised that it was the financial literacy she was after and that she could pursue that on her own. This desire to become a financial advisor is pretty common in my experience. When most are like Ruby, they're just actually looking to learn for themselves, not make a career out of it. And also, it's a warning to be mindful of many financial advisors, not all of them, but many are just peddling products, whether that be insurance, mortgages, or their own brand of investments. So she backed away from that course and she followed up on resources that she heard repeatedly mentioned, such as J.L. Collins, author of The Simple Path to Wealth, which she found to be really good. She thought, okay, we are relatively frugal, but the costs of things are beginning to rise. So what else could we do? Are there better ways of managing our money? After reading my blog, she started tracking their net worth each month, and then she just basically decided to start managing their money a bit better. And in all honesty, that's all it takes, making the decision to change what you do. She admitted that when she gets her teeth into something, she can get a bit intense and a bit addicted to things, but she knew that when it came to money, she needed to do it a bit more softly if she wanted to get Tim on board. So she pushed on with her learning, and she said that she started to plant just little seeds of information with Tim and pick her battles if she met a bit of resistance. Because put yourself in poor old Tim's shoes for a moment. He's at work, and unbeknownst to him, his wife is at home reading, watching, listening, and learning a lot about personal finance. If she suddenly launched at him with, "We need to do XYZ with our pūtea," he will be like, "What the heck is happening here?" So if you are learning about money, you've really got to take your spouse on the ride with you. Learn together, share resources, talk about what you are finding out, and make plans together. Just a few years after starting to explore their finances, Ruby said that Tim's interest and knowledge about money has definitely caught up with her, and she said that he is absolutely on the same train as her, with both of them committed to managing their money well. Give it time, and the reluctant spouse, as they see the changes that are being made working, will start to seek out information of their own, which is just the way you want it. Each of you will come across different information, and before long you will begin to learn from each other, which feeds right back to when Ruby and Tim first moved in together and combined their finances. They did it because they saw each other as a team, and that is still the way they see it today. She encouraged him to change his KiwiSaver to a fund that she'd researched and thought would serve him better over the long run, and he did. She started conversations about the mortgage and what their goals were, and explained what she was thinking they could do, and seeking his input, his advice, and agreement on it. She is still more frugal, and he is still the spender, but nowhere near what he once was, and she has always tended to manage the money, so she said that they are quite good for each other, keeping each other in balance. The fact that they have managed to start some new conversations about money in their whare is just music to my ears, and their commitment to discussing the status quo and future opportunities means they move forwards together. Plus, she said, this new information about how they handle their money at home has also started to flow into how he manages his business as well. Turning their minds to investing in something other than KiwiSaver was a new concept for them both, and her interest in starting was what led her to email me in the very first place. Ruby set up a Sharesies account for herself and also one for each child, depositing and investing $10 weekly into their accounts. Initially, she was buying all sorts of companies along the lines of the, in my view, relatively substandard buy what you know investing advice. Now, I should probably clarify what I mean here. Seriously, ask yourself what clue you have about the direction that the companies you know are going to take. Buying their product does not equate to knowing all the ins and outs for their boardroom decisions. So for Ruby, after a bit of research, she changed tack to investing in the Vanguard 500 Index Fund ETF, ticker code VOO. And by buying this, she is not taking a punt on a single stock, instead buying all the companies. And if she gives it time, the entire share market will rise. Then when Sharesies increased their fees, she left the kids' accounts as they were, but switched her own investments to index fund provider Kernel. She is investing a very precise $62.50 a week into their global ESG fund. Why that amount? Well, that is what she can afford at this time. So instead of waiting to have more money to invest, she did the right thing and she budgeted for investing what she could afford. She wanted to start something to keep learning while investing. And she then explained to Tim what she was doing and how the accounts were growing over time. It's all well and good learning the theory, but actually beginning the habit of investing as a matter of routine and watching what happens is absolutely key to becoming a long-term investor. When the bank mortgage debt is gone, they will already have several years of investing with Kernel under their belt, meaning that they will know where they can direct that freed up mortgage payment. Now, you'll gather from the vibe of this episode that apart from the usual lending arrangements they have for their mortgage, there are no huge swings in financial behaviour, no crazy mistakes, just almost a smooth transition to better financial management that seems to spread across their household finances and then into his business finances too. And these days, their goal is to budget their income well and throw everything they can at their mortgage. And although managing a 10-acre lifestyle block is both a lot of work and quite expensive, they've kind of gone back to living frugally again, much as she once did as a student, she said. They tell their money where to go by budgeting and putting a lot of structure and automation into their bank accounts. And here's a bit of a rundown on those bank accounts. They have an everyday account that their incomes come into, and they use this to pay the groceries, the petrol, and just that general spending stuff. And on a side note, what is their weekly grocery budget, I wondered? They budget $250 max, and given they raise their own cows, pigs, and lambs, they manage to stick to this budget. And given they have the land, Ruby grows a lot of vegetables, and doing so has helped them reduce their grocery spend. Given her focus on good nutrition, preserving produce also means that she can make it last throughout the year, particularly her fruit, meaning that she can avoid buying things when they are at their most expensive in the supermarket. They also have a bills account for common bills such as power, internet and phone and what have you. They have an account for their dog, specifically to make sure that there is money to pay the 3 monthly groom that it needs. There is an account for childcare so they can keep on top of those costs. Plus there's an account for holidays, which gets $200 a week, adding up to $10,400 a year. Now this might feel like a lot, but given the cost of travel, I'd rather see them save this amount than go to book a holiday and come up short. When you set money aside into a sinking fund bank account, it just waits there patiently till you need it. And I like that this busy whānau of 4 is planning for a holiday break. Plus they have some other smaller sinking funds which don't have huge amounts in them but are for specific costs that they know they have coming up. And finally, they each have an account of their own, and that gets $100 a week each to spend however they like. Their accounts are all automated, with money being transferred in and out of them automatically, which saves time and a lot of mental math. And let's face it, if you are both working full-time and have 2 small children, you have to use your time wisely. Because they have a plan for their money and are directing it where to go, they know that whatever is left of their income each month can go directly onto the mortgage. And when we spoke, they are managing to put about $1,700 a week towards their debt. So that's not mucking about. I asked if they have a date in mind for paying off their bank mortgage, and she said, brace yourself, Ruth, you might not like this next bit. They have some house renovations planned in 2024. Of course they do. Namely, upgrading the kitchen and the lounge, and they estimate this work might cost $60,000. I was worried because she mentioned that they have a revolving credit facility, also known as a household ATM machine, on their debt, which is currently fully paid off. The problem with paying down debt, and therefore owning more of your home than the bank does, is that your bank starts to get a little bit concerned about their ongoing cash flow as a business. Banks are in the business of lending money, and homeowners who don't even flinch at tapping into a revolving credit mortgage are exactly the type of homeowners who are good for their business. But thankfully, Ruby and Tim are just a little too smart for that. Once she justified the renovations with, I've put up with this horrible kitchen for 7 years and I absolutely hate it. I love food, but I hate cooking it here. she went on to explain that they intend to cash flow these renovations, which will, of course, delay their mortgage payoff date. And to be honest, she had my buy-in at cash flow the renovations. So in regards to the mortgage, she is anticipating that they will have dropped their mortgage debt by about $100,000 by early 2027, and I suspect she will be able to track its progress from her newly renovated kitchen table. They know that this renovation will delay their mortgage payoff by a couple of years, but at least now their thinking has progressed to the point that they understand that. Unlike when pre-kids, they spent all of their additional income without realising the future impact it would have on their finances. We all get wiser with experience and age. Now, while I'm on that thought of planning ahead, what about that $200,000 parent loan? I just can't let that one go. What does the future hold with that? Despite borrowing $200,000 from her parents, she still doesn't know her parents' financial situation. And while she could ask, they tend to keep the money stuff to themselves. Honestly, I'd be asking questions if I was in her shoes, not out of nosiness, but simply because she is now implicated in their finances, as they are in hers. And if this was a company you were running, where you went into business with another company, and you knew there was a large debt outstanding, you would want to know the entire situation, would you not? I think too that if her parents are aging, having an honest conversation about their future financial plans and just their future plans in general is really worth doing. And once again, in case you think that that is too personal, it really is not. I'm now at an age where my parents and my friends' parents are getting older. They're having health issues, they're needing care, they're needing to sell the house, etc. And some of the situations they uncover are a right muddle. It would have been far more straightforward to have a better plan for aging, if you ask me. And what might that look like? Well, I talk with my mum about her finances, especially since my dad died, and I know that she sees it as a good thing that she is in control, but she has me and my siblings to talk to if she needs us. Everyone feels at ease, and that mum has a plan for her future, which we can help her realise. Now, staying with her parents a little longer, I asked Ruby what was one piece of advice, either good or bad, her parents taught her about money, and what does she wish they had taught her that she has since worked out for herself. Her dad always said, every dollar you earn either increases or decreases your net worth. He never elaborated, and she never understood what he meant at that time, and only recently has she understood, and now she knows it to be true. Every time you have a dollar, well, you have a choice to make about whether to grow your net worth or lower it. Do you want to buy an asset with it or spend it on consumer goods? It's your choice. Also, her parents taught her to work hard and show a good work ethic, both of which she does. She sticks at stuff, and that is a huge attribute when you are managing your pūtea because you are in it for the long haul. And what she wishes they taught her more about was where to put her money and how better to use it. All they knew was property, and that you buy one, you fix it up, you rent it, and you sell it for more. There was never any talk of retirement savings and putting money aside for the future, or share investing, or even having an emergency fund for a rainy day. So with their own tamariki, Ruby is taking the good bits her parents taught her and adding in the extra things she now knows to be useful. She wants them to have options. It was only when she was many years out of study that she realised how much of a head start the scholarship gave her as she watches all her friends who are now well into their 30s still paying off their student loans. She wants her kids to have money and understand how it works so that they have choices. Each child has a money box and a chore chart on the fridge, and they have to do things throughout the week to get their $3 and $4. The bit I loved is that she shows them their Sharesies account and she explains how it works and what its future purpose will be, and she knows that the best thing she can do for her kids is educate them thoroughly about all aspects of money that relate to daily life. She said she will never be done teaching, and I completely agree. I'm equally open with talking about money in my home. We have had thousands of tiny conversations, which is why it feels entirely natural for me to discuss money with my parents too. So life is really busy for this team of four, but it has a sense of order to it. She said that although a more part-time role would have been preferable, it is what it is, and she feels she is a better person being back at work. They are financially driven and they know that putting in the mahi now and making good money will give them a leg up and more freedom later. This is an intense period of their lives, and I wondered, given she got a sporting scholarship to university, if she has carried on with her sport. Well, yes, she still keeps really active with 5:30 a.m. gym sessions. She likes an early start, this woman, which is the only time she can fit it in, and social hockey. But the longer-term plan is that once the kids are both in primary school, she can step back the hours at work and take them to their sports. Getting the mortgage gone early will help them set up their life to do that. Now, I've mentioned her greatest financial win, but what does she consider to be her greatest financial flop? She said that buying their current property was not the best decision because for that time, it was a massive mortgage to take on, and it would have been better if they bought something smaller. The property is now valued at about $1.1 million, and it is zoned for good schools, but it has a lot of outgoings, and it crosses their mind to downsize and move to a, say, 1,000 square metre section instead. But for now, they stay. And if they were given $10,000 right now, what would they both do with it? It would all go straight to their kernel investment, but if it had have been any more than that, it would have gone on the mortgage, she said. Whew. So as I near the end and try to wrap up my long and enjoyable kōrero with Ruby, I have another quick message from today's sponsor. If your finances are holding you back from living the life you want, try Pocketsmith out. They've got the tools to help you make money management easier. And have we got a deal for you? Happy Saver listeners get a whopping 50% off your first 2 months of Pocketsmith Foundation Plan. To get your deal, go to pocketsmith.com/thehappysaver. That's pocketsmith.com/thehappysaver. I really enjoyed speaking with Ruby, and firstly, I just wanted to say a huge big thank you to her and Tim, who she spoke on behalf of, for being just so very open. Now, I only spoke with Ruby, and I had so many questions that I didn't get to, but I don't stress myself out about this as I once did, because I think we could have spoken for a week, and all these interesting bits of information and avenues of questioning would still keep coming up. Because, you see, each family's financial situation is different, and each situation is a growing collection of decisions that have been made using the information that you've got at the time. There is nothing remarkable about their journey. I actually think that it's typical of a lot of Kiwis, and when I think about this couple, what I particularly like is that they continue to adjust their financial course as new information comes to light. There have been no huge moves, just, it seems, a lot of kōrero and some collective decision-making about what changes they should make in light of what they now know, such as simple things like tracking their net worth and budgeting. They are two switched-on cookies who knew a lot about their areas of expertise, and since they've discovered some better financial behaviours and tools, well, they've simply schooled themselves up with additional information, and now they add managing our money well to their skill set and areas of expertise. And I just love this. They don't stay stuck. They are always looking to learn and improve. I think they are coming up to a financial junction, though, in regards to the parent loan. And my thoughts on that are to wonder how generous parents are really being when they offer this opportunity to their children. Does it come with some unintended hooks that only reveal themselves down the track? I think if a parent is considering stumping up money for a house for their child, they should ask themselves if they need that money for their own financial future, and if so, keep it and manage your own money. But if you don't, if you have more than what you need, then give it away with an open hand and trust that your child will make the correct choice about how to manage it. And that comes all the way back around to teaching our children how to manage their money well. So that's all from me this week, and if you want to get in touch, you know you can find me at thehappysaver.com. Thanks to all the people who send me such lovely emails telling me you like this podcast. I really appreciate you taking the time to do that. And please do share the podcast with your friends. It's obviously the best way that people can learn about it. And I would obviously love it if you would talk more about money with your own friends and whānau and continue to help me help others be better with money. So until next time, happy saving.